Hello world, welcome to Learning Java, one byte at a time. This is the third video in a tutorial series geared at bringing the wonderful wide world of Java to those with little or no programming experience. In the last video, we performed the installation of the JDK, that's the Java Development Kit. We also added the essential commands to the system path so that they can be accessed from anywhere. And in this video, we're finally going to get down to brass tacks and write our very first program, which is a Hello World program. Now, Hello World programs are convention. Whenever a programmer learns a new language, it's common that they make their first program a Hello World program. It's essentially the most simple kind of program you can write in any language. It's a way of getting your foot on the first rung of that ladder. And it performs the incredible task of displaying to the screen a single line of text that reads, you guessed it, Hello World. So, before we start, it's important to understand that with Java code, while you can write your Java code in something as sophisticated and complex as an IDE, that's an integrated development environment, such as Android Studio or Eclipse or NetBeans, it's also easy to write your Java code in something as simple and accessible as Notepad. So, for simplicity, this tutorial will be using Notepad, but I have a particular favorite kind of Notepad called Notepad++. One of the reasons I really enjoy Notepad++, which is only a Google search away and a completely free download, is that whenever the file type that you're writing is recognized as a Java file type, that is, it has the extension .java, Notepad++ will actually stylize the text to make it more readable as code and easier on the eyes. So, if you're using the standard Notepad, word for word, this is going to be identical. However, if you are using Notepad++, you'll start by going to the file and save as, and making your new file. We're going to call ours Hello World, paying special attention to the case sensitivity. If this were the regular Notepad, we'd have to add the .java extension so that it was saved properly. However, when working with Notepad++, you have the option to come over to a save as file type, and you can select the Java source file from this wide array of different text file types that are available. And when picking the Java source file type, it automatically appends the .java to it. So when we save that, it will stylize the code for us so that when we're writing our Java code, it'll be easier to read. Alright, so beginning our Hello World program. One of the things that's important to understand when writing Java is that everything is a class. And while it's difficult to explain what a class is in just a couple of sentences, essentially what a class is something that contains a little bit of code, sometimes a lot of code, and it's something that can be called from another class. And so were you to be working with something that's a large structure, some incredibly complex computer program, you would want to break it up into little fragments, and those fragments would ideally be classes. And one class would execute some amount of code, and it might call another class, which might in turn call another class. So, not to put too fine of a point on it, we're going to make this a class, and everything that's going to be our code is going to be in the class, and nothing is going to be outside of the class. This being quite a simple program, it's only going to require the one class. And the way that we're going to start this class is by first telling Java, I'm going to make a class, and we're going to give it a name. In this case, we're going to call it Hello World. And again, we're paying special attention to the case. The next thing we need to do is we need to make a set of curly braces, because everything that's going to be inside these curly braces is going to be part of the class Hello World. Alright, so every class has to have an entry point. The Java virtual machine, the runtime environment, has to know where to start when it begins to execute a class. And the main entry point of any Java class is going to be the main method. Now, when you first see how the main method is instantiated, it's a little interesting and maybe a little confusing, but the nice thing is it's exactly the same every single time. So the way that we're going to instantiate the main class, the entry point for the Java runtime environment, is in the following. We're going to declare it as being public. We're going to declare that it is static. We're going to declare that it's going to return nothing. It's going to return void. And then we're going to give it a name, which, as we mentioned, is going to be main, because this is the main method. Now, the main method has to accept one particular parameter, and the way that we pass a parameter to a method is with the parentheses. And inside these parentheses, we're going to start with the type of parameter that we're passing, and then the reference name that we're going to use. That is, when we pass this parameter into this method, we're going to give it a name, and we're essentially telling Java, every time I use this name, I'm talking about this, this particular parameter that I'm passing in. And so the type parameter is going to be a string, which is a string of text. Now, it's not just a string, it's actually going to be a string array, and we signify that it's an array by using the hard brackets like that. And an array is just a list. And so what we're really passing through is a list of strings of characters, so a list of text. And we're going to name it args. Now, we're probably never going to actually use this parameter that we pass through. It's typically used by the system or by other features of Java, but it's important that it's always included, even though it'll rarely be something that you'll need to actually mess with. And so the main method, just like the class, is going to have its own set of curly braces. And in those sets of curly braces, everything we type is going to be part of the main method. And so, this being a very simple method, it's only going to have one call. What we want to tell it to do is we want to tell it to display to the screen a string of text that says hello world. And so now what we have to do is we have to tell Java, look, I want to print a line of something, and I'm going to pass through the parameters exactly what I want to print, and I want that to go out, not in, and I want it to go out to the system. And the system can be anything that's running the Java virtual machine. This could be the toaster oven, the Blu-ray player, the smartphone, the PC, whatever it is that has Java on it that's executing your code is the system. So in this case, we're working on a PC, so our system is the PC. And as I mentioned before, we're going to go out to the PC. We're not calling information in from the PC. And the specific thing we're going to do out to the PC is print the line. And then in the parameters, we're going to say exactly what we want that line to say. And so here's how that looks. Going to call system with a capital S. We're going to say I want it to go out to the system. We're going to say what I want to do out to the system is print a line. And then using the parentheses to pass through the parameters, that is, what is it that we want to print, we're going to print out the words hello world. However, since this is a literal string of text, we need to also include quotation marks. Everything inside the quotation marks is going to be literally printed to the screen. So let's print out hello world just the way we want it to be seen, and throw a little exclamation point on there just for fun. The last thing we're going to do is use a semicolon. The semicolon essentially tells Java, this is the end of this line of code. Anything you see after this is going to be a new line. And the reason that we have the semicolon is because you can in fact have code that moves over several lines, such as this. And while that's not readable to us, it's definitely readable to Java, because again, when Java gets to the semicolon and then gets down to a new line of code, it knows that it's a new line of code. Otherwise, until it sees a semicolon, it's going to interpret all of this as though it were one line. So, we have our class, which is the hello world class. We have inside the class the mandatory main method, which is the entry point for the Java virtual machine. And we're declaring it as public, static, void, and we've named it main. And we've passed through the obligatory parameters, the array of strings that we're calling args, that we're probably never going to mess with. And then inside that, we're going to do the very first thing, which is going to be printing a line called hello, or printing a line that reads hello world out to the system. And that's it. We'll talk a little bit more about what these do, the public, the static, and the void. But for the purposes of this video, let's go ahead and save this, compile it, and run it. So you'll do that by opening up your command prompt. You'll navigate to the directory that this file is saved in, and I can show you here if we run a directory command, you'll see that we have the file we just made, the hello world.java. Then we're going to compile this file.java with the javac command as such. Again, paying very special attention to the case and also including the .java extension. And so if there are no errors in the code, it will compile successfully. If there were errors in the code, it wouldn't compile and it would tell us where the errors are approximately and what they are. And so it looks like it compiled successfully. And the way to see if that happened is the compiler would have made a class file out of this .java file. So let's do another directory search to see if we can see the class file. And there now we have the hello world.class. So the class file is what the Java virtual machine is going to be able to run. So the JRE, as we talked about before, can only interpret bytecode, and it uses the API, the application programming interface, to interface that bytecode to whichever particular system it's on. It can't do much with the Java. This is readable for us until it compiles it into bytecode, and then the Java virtual machine recognizes the bytecode. So now we're going to use the Java virtual machine, the JRE, to run the class file, to run the bytecode, and it's going to interface that to my PC. So we're going to do that with the Java command. The only difference is we're not going to include the extension. We're not going to include .class or .java. It knows, it's sort of implicit that it is a class file, so it's just going to assume that it is. So simply typing Java hello world will actually execute the class file. And there we have it. We've printed to our system out the string of text that literally reads hello world, complete with the exclamation point. And so this is pretty much your first program. And so if you had to go back and break it down, there's really not a whole lot going on there, but it is a great way to start the introduction to Java and to see how the flow of a class file works and the purpose of a main method. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about variables and different types of variables, and we'll also get into a little bit about what these words in the method actually do and mean, the difference between public, private, and protected, what a static is versus a non-static method, what it would mean to actually return something other than void, and we'll cover all of that in subsequent videos. In the meantime, if any of this wasn't clear or there's any errors up on your part, just message down in the comment section. We can work it out together. I thank you for watching this video, and I can't wait to see you again soon.